Lesson 4. Simple Problem Deconstruction. At some point in time, every human being has experienced the feeling of being overwhelmed. It could be the result of a flood of emotions in a time of crisis. It could be from the complexity of a single situation or a death by 1,000 cuts. You steel yourself and try to focus, but thoughts and emotions pour in. Confusion, anger, despair, and futility. All hope seems lost, and then the moment ends. What makes something overwhelming? To be overwhelmed implies that the resources are not available to deal with the task at hand. These could be physical, mental, spiritual, or any combination thereof. The dam has sprung 1,000 holes, but there are only 100 workers to plug them. The test is tomorrow, and you haven't read the book. Your spouse has filed for divorce, and you didn't even know the relationship was in trouble. However it has occurred, you have now been presented with a complex problem. Complexity is the opposite of simplicity. Things are simple when choices are limited and obvious. Complexity is the result of numbers and ambiguity. Complexity is fuzzy logic with no right answer. Let's illustrate this concept with an example from popular culture. In the classic science fiction film Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, there is a pivotal scene in which the Federation starship Reliant has been hijacked by the antagonist, Khan. In his quest for vengeance against Captain James Kirk, Khan pursues and approaches Kirk's ship, the Enterprise. As he closes in, Khan confuses Kirk by not communicating, leading the Enterprise crew to speculate that Reliant's communication systems may have failed. Since the Reliant is also a Federation ship, Kirk does not take the defensive action that would normally be standard protocol in this type of situation, the result of a calculated tactic by Khan so that Kirk cannot easily see what is about to happen. Khan has made the situation intentionally complex to befuddle Kirk and leave his ship vulnerable to attack. This is an example of a highly complex problem. In the movie, Kirk even makes the statement that, quote, "This is damn peculiar." He is faced with many incongruencies and complexities. Here is a ship from his own fleet that could be in peril, but it is on an intercept course and not communicating. He has an overwhelming amount of input data and emotion, and it directly impacts his decision-making. But it is a little earlier in the film that another character, Mr. Spock, makes a critical analysis about a similar problem when trying to communicate with the space station that the Reliant had recently visited. When analyzing that communication problem, Mr. Spock gave the following statement: "There are two possibilities. They are unable to respond. They are unwilling to respond." Had Kirk used this same simplification in dealing with Reliant, his necessary course of action would have been much more clear. What Mr. Spock has illustrated is a concept of simple problem deconstruction. This is the reframing of a complex problem into a series of simple, actionable problems. He has reduced the complexity of the situation by breaking the problem into two choices. In his first, they are unable to respond. There would be little harm done to the Enterprise by taking no immediate defensive action. But in his second, they are unwilling to respond. The potential consequences become readily apparent. If the first scenario was in fact the case, it would make no difference if Kirk were to take action and raise his shields. But in the second, it could mean the difference between life and death. By deconstructing a similar complex problem, the choice became more obvious. Of course, in the movie, Kirk waited too long, and his ship suffered as a result. You will often hear someone state that a problem is too difficult to solve. They may not even want to think about it because the task is too daunting, or state that there is no real solution, so why bother? In response to this apathy, consider that a problem is really only a choice of options in a moment of time, and you only have two choices. Either take an action, or take no action at all. In reality, a solution is simply an action taken in response to a problem, and there is not always a guarantee that the solution is the correct one. You are presented with choices in almost every moment of your life. Should you continue watching this critical play, or change the channel? Should you get up to use the restroom when the player is lining up at the penalty spot? Should you answer the phone that displays that your aging mother is calling in the middle of the game? Each of these choices represents a problem. Most of these problems are simple and straightforward. So simple, in fact, that you choose a solution without even consciously having to consider alternatives. You don't change the channel in the middle of a critical play. You don't get up to go use the restroom at this moment. But your mother calling. The current social climate is replete with complex problems, or perhaps they are just problems that have been made complex. Consider the following statements. I can't seem to get ahead in life because there are too many obstacles. Not enough people are taking the climate seriously. The government is broken. Capitalism doesn't work. These are vague, ambiguous statements that have numerous components, making them complex to analyze and difficult to solve. Part of what makes these complex is that they do not even specifically define a problem to be solved. Let's examine this phenomenon more closely. Problem. I just can't seem to get ahead in life. Not to make light of a very real feeling, but is this even a problem? What does it mean to get ahead in life? Get ahead of what? We are back to lesson 1. What is the datum you are using as a baseline? What are the criteria you are using for measurement? Do you desire more money? Do you want a bigger home? Do you need emotional support? This is a great example of ambiguity causing complexity. Specific issues can be addressed. Broad, nebulous feelings cannot. If the problem is a lack of money, you can analyze potential causes and solutions. Do you need a job that pays more? Do you need additional education and training to obtain that job? Does that job exist? Is there an alternative mechanism to obtain that money? You see, problem definition is key. You cannot solve a problem that doesn't exist. Problem. Not enough people are taking climate seriously. There are some key concepts causing ambiguity and complexity in this statement. What does it mean to take climate seriously? If a person recycles, monitors their electrical usage, and conserves water, is that serious consideration? Who or what is the arbiter that decides when something is being considered seriously? How many people constitutes enough? Again, who or what decides? What metrics are applied to determine that, quote, not enough people are taking climate seriously, and how is this data collected? We also have a similar issue with problem definition here. What problem would getting people to, quote, take climate seriously actually solve? Once again, we return to the datum and measurement criteria. Problem. Capitalism doesn't work. What does it mean for something to work? Measurable results compared to defined criteria that outline success. Simply making a sweeping statement without objective measurement leaves you with nothing but conjecture. This statement isn't a problem, it's a philosophy of defeatism. Those who do not have your best interests at heart have worked hard to move you away from reason and logic and push you toward emotion and feeling. When you observe a problem in your everyday life, seeing a homeless man on the street digging through trash, for example, it is human to react with emotion. To some, the man is a victim of the cruelty of a failed system. To others, he is a bum that doesn't work hard enough. Which of these is correct? Are either of these correct? What is the problem that needs to be solved? Does he need a home? Does he need a job? Does he need mental care? Is it by his choice? Detailed problem definition is critical. Without it, you have no idea what you are trying to accomplish. Now that the importance of detailed problem definition has been stressed, let's look at some tools that can be used to solve defined, complex problems. Consensus. Let's assume that we have a complex perceived problem. To stoke the fire of debate, imagine the following scenario. After years of the painstaking analysis of calibrated data measurement from independent experts in the field, a consensus has been reached that there is too much carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, causing the average planetary temperature to warm. In this hypothetical, the data clearly and directly correlates an increase in temperature with the increased usage of the combustion engine for work and transportation over the last century. The only solution, according to these independent experts, is to take drastic measures to eliminate the amount of CO2 being expelled into the atmosphere. For our purposes, let's ignore the basic truth that correlation does not necessarily equal causation, and move on to complexity. What makes this complicated? To begin, the entire world depends on combustion engines for work, transportation, and even recreation. People have come to rely on this relatively cheap, abundant technology and will not readily give it up as it would make their lives more austere. There are significant emotions involved, not to mention the economic impact on the world. Finally, not everyone agrees that this is a problem. How can you proceed? To begin, you must consider the concept of consensus. It is rare to have 100% agreement in any human endeavor, but consensus is easier to establish in the face of transparent, definitive data based upon reasonable measurement. It is much simpler to get the villagers to move when you show them satellite data that the volcano is increasing in size and venting smoke, rather than just telling them to relocate. Impartiality is also critical. People are more likely to seriously consider information from an independent scientific body than a politician or someone with an agenda. Transparency is imperative. If data and methods are open to examination and deconstruction, people will be less likely to reject them. Finally, open debate should be welcomed. Clear, transparent data presented in an unbiased, impartial forum will help to answer questions, and when questions are valid, they must receive honest and thorough response. Truth does not fear investigation. Finally, the presenting body must understand that projections are only opinions, which makes them inherently easy to dispute. You cannot jump to the future to validate your hypotheses. The tools available to combat this problem are the quality of the supporting data and historical precedent, if available. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. If you make a bold, predictive statement, be prepared to defend it. Let's say that magic happens and a consensus is reached. It is agreed that planetary temperature has risen because of the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and there is a correlation with the use of combustion engines. So what's the real problem here? Is it the amount of combustion engines or the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere? If the original thesis is that atmospheric CO2 is causing a rise in planetary temperature, the problem is the amount of CO2. So does reducing the number of combustion engines solve that problem? Using precedent, it is assumed that the increase in engine usage led to the increase in atmospheric CO2. So by that logic, reducing or eliminating engine usage will at least slow, if not stop, the increase in the amount of atmospheric CO2. But there is already too much, right? So even if we eliminate the engines, it would not solve the current problem. But let's skip that inconvenience and say that we just need to stop the increase, and killing engines is how we're going to do it. Can't versus won't. Almost any problem can be reduced into simpler parts using a can't versus won't argument. If something can't be done, it is impossible, so there is no point in attempting. That's different than won't. As an example, consider the statement, I can't eat peanut butter because I have an allergy. This implies that you are physically unable to eat peanut butter, which is likely untrue. Unless you are missing a mouth and digestive tract, you can physically eat it. It would be more correct to say that you won't eat peanut butter because of an allergy. Interestingly, this also helps to focus on the actual problem. It's not the peanut butter, it's the body's allergic response. If you stop eating the peanut butter, you have not solved the problem. You're simply taking a preventative measure. There is a distinction. Back to the engines. The main contrary argument is that it is impossible to get rid of them all. It is said that it can't be done. But since engines are physical objects that can be destroyed, this is a patentedly false statement. It can be done, which leaves us with the concept of won't. Won't is a choice, and choices can be examined by asking the question why. This is the mechanism that lets us break our problem into simpler parts. Perhaps the engines won't be removed because they are critical and there is no replacement technology available that is cost and performance effective. Interesting. Now we have a different problem, don't we? If the development of a superior replacement technology was made a priority, how would that change the situation? What if we proposed a solution where half of the money the world spends on weapons development would be allocated instead to the development of this replacement technology? But that can't be done, right? A complex problem can always be deconstructed by refining definition, building consensus, and reducing complexity by breaking things into simpler parts. Using analysis tools like can't versus won't can help to simplify and identify actionable items. The key is to turn nebulous, overarching ideas into specific, concrete problems that have specific, concrete solutions. These tools can do that. Do not let emotion usurp logic and reason. In this time of manufactured strife, remember that political ideology is not a definitive problem, but an uncontrolled flow of immigrants into a country that strains its resources is. Consider that a leader's social media persona does not cause economic failure, but her choice of fiscal policies may. Understand that choosing a college major that has not historically led to a lucrative career is not a poor choice, unless it results in placing you in crushing debt that cannot be repaid. Emotion is an enemy of reason. When you feel overwhelmed by a complex problem, take a breath, remove emotion, and use the tools discussed to deconstruct it into a manageable, actionable set of solvable questions. There is no time like the present.